We begin tonight with a sharp split screen, dividing American sentiments toward Donald Trump, of course. And it's not just a basic case of right versus left. There seems to be a real shift in momentum. This weekend, organizers say at least 8 million Americans took to the streets with a clear message as part of the third major protest against Trump and his second term, declaring no kings in America. They voiced their outrage over the war with Iran, mass deportation and ICE operations, and fears of a constitutional crisis. That anger is festering, and Trump's approval numbers continue to sink. A new Reuters poll shows him at a record low 36% approval rating, the lowest number since his return to the White House. Meanwhile, in Texas, conservatives have gathered for the annual Conservative Political Action Conference. You know it as CPAC. A movement that once projected star power and invincibility is now rife with its own internal disagreements. It also marks the first CPAC Donald Trump did not attend since 2016. Vice President J.D. Vance and Elon Musk, they also were nowhere to be found there. Instead, attendees got this.
We're just going to outbreed the left.
The Democrat Party is the party of rich coastal elites, effete leftists, sipping soy lattes with their pinkies in the air.
President Trump is exactly the opposite of everything that I believed him to be. He's the opposite of a narcissist. He's an empath.
And joining us now, Charles Blow, author of Blow the Stack on Substack, and Sarah Ellison, a former Washington Post reporter. It's great to have you both here at the table with us tonight.
Thanks for having
Charles,
me.
I'll start with you. Okay. Do you think Republicans should read anything into that split screen there?
Well, it is clear to me that the momentum is on the Democrat side. That is not out of sorts with what history would say would be happening in a midterm when one party has held both the White House and the Congress. But it should be worrisome, and I think that what you see Donald Trump doing with trying to intervene in midterm elections tells you that he is worried. He doesn't want to be rebuked, number one. He doesn't want to be impeached again, which is a real possibility if Democrats take back the House. And he does not want his agenda to be stymied in any way or have anyone stand in the way of it. And that is what is motivating him. And I think that is what you're seeing in the electorate. There are a lot of people who voted for him. They thought they were going to bring down the price of eggs or whatever the case may be, price of everything. And they thought that they were going to get out of endless wars. He is hurting the economy. And now we're back into wars. He's bombed 7 countries in 1 year. That is not what they voted for.
Sarah, there is one piece of information, or one viewpoint anyway, on which both of sides of those split screens have agreement, and that's maybe the war. At both the No Kings protests and, at least from some of the people who are participating in CPAC, there were people voicing concerns about our forays into Iran. Let's play some of that.
This isn't, what I voted for. What I voted for was domestic policy change at home and, realistic foreign policy.
No Trump in 5 generations has ever served his country in the Army. And the way that Trump has conducted his presidency, he has not served this country either in that. I consider him to be a traitor.
So what do you make of that? That there does seem to be, I don't know if it's horseshoe theory or it's just there's widespread antipathy towards the war. What do you make of the fact that there is, at the very least, skepticism toward the war from both sides of the political aisle here?
Well, on the Republican side, there's no question that the younger generation of Republicans are by far anti this effort. And it's interesting to me that it took this particular conflict to be the thing that actually broke them. But I think that, there's a real divide both generationally and also between the sort of traditional MAGA and the more conservative, the shrinking part of the Republican Party. On the Democratic side, the general perception is that this war was perpetrated in order to benefit Israel. And the Democratic Party has largely turned, a generational divide kind of against that expansive Israeli kind of opposite, that kind of regional sort of aggression. And so I think that some of that is why you're seeing both sides of this. But I mean, there's no question that also both parties are really, with this war, looking at what comes after Trump and what he's going to leave everyone with. And I don't think anyone really has the answer to that.
Well, I still thought it was interesting that Marco Rubio polled so well in the CPAC straw poll behind J.D. Vance, of course, but his numbers are still up there, and he certainly represents a very hawkish, muscular Republican foreign policy. And CPAC this weekend, it really just shows the death of that as an influential center for the conservative movement, in contrast to what was happening out on the streets yesterday. But here's what surprised me, and Charles, I want your opinion on this. So you've got millions of Americans coming out for one of the largest protests in American history, ton of energy, no kings yesterday. Why were the Democratic frontrunners not advertising their presence? Why were they not seemingly part of it? It seemed like Gavin Newsom, MIA, Gretchen Whitmer, where was she? Pete Buttigieg made an appearance, but really, otherwise, where were the Democratic Party leaders?
Well, one thing about No Kings is that it is grassroots. It is, and it's a particular portion of the Democratic Party. It's not all of it. So if you've ever been to these things, I've been to them. It's very white. It's older. These are the old hippies who really remember being afraid of fascism and totalitarianism in other places, and they cannot believe that it has come to America. And they are active in that way. They are active in the way that they were in the 60s. There's a revitalization of them. Hispanics are upset, but not part of that necessarily. Not saying they're not there at all, but like it's another movement among Hispanics. There's another movement among Muslims in America. I visited with Muslims in America when they were very upset with Kamala Harris and Joe Biden and telling me that they were never going to vote for them. They were going to deal with whatever happened if Trump was elected. They're very upset about what has happened and did not, I don't believe, expected this much people. Black people are also upset. Betrayed. It's not just an upset. It is betrayal is what they feel. This is my own personal opinion of that. How could you possibly let this happen? All of what we're saying, you could have prevented it by voting for this black lady, and you just refused. Like, there is a betrayal in that has stung for a year and a half. And they now occasionally get a chance to voice that, and they're just going out to the polls. They're not part of marching anymore. We've done it. We're tired. Our feet are tired. We dance a little bit. We do a little line dance, but we're not going to go out and do the marching. But we are going to show up to vote. And these four different strands are all pointing in the same direction for Democrats in their favor. Not necessarily one big group, but four different strands pointing towards a very successful midterm for Democrats, if, in fact, we get free and fair elections, which is still an outstanding question.
I'm curious if you got a sense, if you were out yesterday at the protests or if you just looked at some of the imagery. My impression as someone who's had to cover all three of them was that by this third, and perhaps it's the sort of anti-war energy that brought a lot more younger people out, that it was more diverse in terms of age diversity, but also in terms of racial diversity. There were a lot of immigrants. I mean, New York is a city of immigrants, so it's not hard to find them on any street when you're walking around. But both at the press conference, speaking about their experience in this country, in this city right now, who were walking, who had signs, who were open to telling their stories to reporters who were walking around at these. And then I also saw specifically, actually, a lot of black immigrants who work in the healthcare space in New York who wanted to not just talk about their own experience in this country right now, but also the patients that they're seeing. And they did a really fantastic job, I will say, of kind of talking about a different kind of split screen, so not between the left and right in this country, but between what's happening abroad and what's happening here at home. They are seeing patients come in who say they can't afford food. They are seeing patients who've had to delay appointments, who have been personally affected by the fact that the Obamacare subsidies were not extended. And they're living it, and then they're also struggling to pay their rent here in New York, and then they're hearing someone say we're going to spend $1 million+ or $1 billion, plus dollars a day on this war that we haven't explained to you or talked to your elected representatives about yet. And so I wonder if, in some ways, some of these threads, these parts of the Democratic Party will converge. I don't know that No Kings will own all of that, but there did seem to be a little bit of a shift to me. I don't know if you felt that.
Well, I would say, well, first of all, I was here in New York, not in my home state of Georgia, because I was going to be with you lovely people today.
Well, thank you for that.
But the one that I went to previously in Atlanta, which is where I think you should focus your attention. New York is going to be blue regardless, and it's a different kind of a situation. I think you should focus on what is happening in these swing states that are going to be crucial in the next election, like a Georgia. And what I see there is, and that's in Atlanta, is where the primary No Kings March is in Georgia, is a majority black city.
Yeah.
You just didn't see enough of the black people in this majority black city showing up for it. But they are upset. They are active. They cannot wait for a chance to get out and show and demonstrate with something, tangible, which is a vote. And so I think that all of those things are happening, and it just all works together. It may not show up together, but it all works together for a Democratic advantage.
Final thought to you, Sarah, about the CPAC poll that we just referenced there and what it means for the Republican Party going forward. Obviously, if the midterms pan out the way many are predicting it to be, a blue wave that puts a death knell really into the MAGA movement for now and makes him a lame duck president for 2 years, how does the Republican Party reconstitute itself in these final 2 years with Trump still the president, but no clear heir apparent, and many people feeling betrayed by his first 2 years in this second term?
I mean, I think that the person that this is the most difficult for is J.D. Vance, who clearly was seen as a non-interventionist, the representative of that wing of the party. And now he sort of has to own this Iran war. He's Trump's vice president. I'm not sure if Trump would have done this if he were still having to win elections, because it's a very risky and unpopular move. So I think for Vance, it's going to be very difficult to both live the next 2 years under Trump. He can't really cross him, but he also is going to own some of these really unpopular foreign policy decisions that Trump has now been championing.
Charles Blow and Sarah Ellison, thanks for being with us tonight. Hope you can come back.